I would like to now transition to our last main stage presentation of the day. And for our last segment, I would like to invite back on stage Yogesh to lead a panel with all of our fantastic customer keynoters. So Yogesh, come on up.
All right, so this is the part where I get to have fun, not just all of you, so along with you, because I get to invite 4 of our keynote speakers who have spoken over the last 2 days and basically ask them some questions and see what they say, right? So what I'd like to do is, ask Claudio from Technion, Anna from CGI, Ravi from 407 ETR, and Neil from Jefferson Health. Come on back up.
Everyone's picking up their seat.
Any seat's equally fine. There are pictures in the back. So anyway, people aren't lined up as the pictures. You get to recognize them. Hope you can figure out the name to the face.
Play musical chairs here, I think.
Yeah, there you go. So thank you so much. First of all, thank you for the wonderful sessions over the last 2 days. And so what I wanted to do was just sort of ask you some questions related to what you've spoken about and maybe some of things that you haven't quite talked about. And what I'd like to do, the way I'd like to do this is I'm going to ask them a question. I'll ask a particular individual, but please, the rest of you don't hesitate to also add to it, right? So just because I ask one of you. So actually, Claudio, I thought I'd start with you. New technology is really exciting, right? You see all kinds of stuff being talked about this morning. Dimitri showed, some cool AR, VR, and this, that, and the other, right? Tell me about some of the technologies that you've looked at and share with the audience. What do you think is really applicable today? What is it that you are saying, I got to wait for a while, and why?
We're geeky about experimenting. Like we get really excited. I get really excited about new tech, and it's good to see the people around you be excited, even if they're not very techy people. And I showed some in my presentation that we've been experimenting with, and some that we've been successful with. We found some that are incredibly important right now, and I really believe in have not served us well. We found that, for example, our people were quickly jumping to, we need that to be in VR as a presentation tool. And we were finding that we were being asked to maybe solution a problem before someone actually broke down the criteria they needed to solve for that problem, right? So we want VR to be used to present in a group setting. Well, VR can be incredibly isolating, right? You're sitting with your group. First of all, you're putting a headset on someone who's probably never used it before. Now you ask them to experience something that you're trying to show them for the first time, and they're doing it with a group who may not be in the same experience with them. It could be quite a frustrating experience for someone that you're trying to win over to your side as a client. We've also had IoT is super exciting, and of course we've tried putting it inside our furniture. We've had a POC that, as a POC it was very successful, but did it make us want to go immediately to having sensors inside every single thing we make? No, we found that, first of all, furniture moves around. So we were finding our sensors were leaving the building. We were getting really nutty results. But we all have a really great IoT device on us all times, right? So I think our next test is going to be, because really what we're doing is measuring usage around people and usage around a space, is measuring people just using their phones.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to pick up on that thread from Claudio, tech for the sake of tech, firmly believe has its place, certainly. There's certainly a segment of every organization that I would highly encourage to do tech for the sake of tech. But then when it comes to commercializing it, when it comes to driving net new revenue opportunities, there needs to be a value proposition. And without a value proposition, I think Claudio hit the nail on the head. Oftentimes you're asked You're given the solution instead of the problem. We want this, but what is it that you need? And we find that across a lot of organizations, oftentimes when new tech comes, there's a segment of the organization that wants it for the sake of the tech. And they often get confused that they're not giving you the problem. We want to solve really interesting problems. We don't want to be given solutions. And there's always that balance to say, don't give me the solution, give me the problem.
Interesting. Ravi, interesting sort of follow-up on that, right? You bring in new tech, but then what's sort of the role of integration, right? In the end, a lot of this stuff seems to need to work with other things too, right? So how do you view the role of integration and sort of taking it a little bit towards the people side? Megan spoke tremendously eloquently about people and leveraging people's knowledge, expertise, and skills. How do you find the right people? How do you emphasize integration skills when you do hiring of people and so on?
There's two aspects to that question. There's a technology portion and there's a people portion. And I would say 10 years ago, there was a very solid line between systems and integration. You were either building applications or you were the ones integrating. As little as 5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I don't think such a thing exists as a problem or a project that's not an integration project. There's no such thing as building a project out, having an initiative, and then doing the integration. Every project is an integration project. There's no such thing as a delineation between I'm done this now the integration folks have to go and make it all work together. Every project is an integration project. And so right from the very beginning, you have to start understanding how is this going to integrate? Because it's not a concept of if it's going to integrate, it's a concept of when. This is going to integrate. It may not be today, but it's certainly going to be tomorrow. So that leads us to the people problem. So if the technology problem can be solved by putting integration first, then the people problem can be solved in the exact same manner, which is how do you integrate a diverse set of skill sets, a diverse set of opinions, a diverse set of perspectives, and take all of that into account? How do you meld that? How do you make that mesh? Just the way that there are right ways to solve integration problems, and there's, as we all know, very poor ways to solve integration problems. It comes down to the same thing for people. There's a right way to put people together, and then there's a way that's just going to lead to conflict, and it's going to lead to derision, and it's going to lead to a lot of problems. And so I think looking at skill sets, you want to look for the people who have the mentality of both tech and people putting integration first, understanding how to work with teams, how to value different perspectives, how to make sure that you have a multitude of different opinions in the room that all come from different experiences. Tech and people, both are integration problems, and both have to come first.
Can I
Sure.
add to that, Yogesh? I mean, in healthcare, almost every problem, like you said, is for us an integration problem. And the bigger challenge is that a lot of the companies we work with that are in the core healthcare space that have built their fortunes on solving very, very singular problems inside of healthcare have a business model that is very much about owning that data and not sharing it. And for years they've profited from that. And the problem is we can't solve problems anymore unless we get to that data, and then we can infuse our own data and insights back into those systems, which are ultimately the front-end systems for a lot of people in our organization. So almost every project and every problem is a fragmented problem, and every solution requires a lot of interfaces. And on the people side, I will say that as a slightly different kind of view on how to get people to do the most valuable things, we found is actually take out some of the passion that you might have. Yes, yeah, I mean, and designers do that really well, because for them, the ultimate goal is not about getting a solution in, it's about getting the right solution in, that fixes the problem that you've identified, either ethnographically or, sometimes almost being able to see the problem. In healthcare, we can do that a lot. And then solving for that problem in a completely dispassionate kind of way. And I don't mean that in a negative way, in that if you get too passionate about your solution for something, you will never see that there are other options, right? And so we have to do it, and we owe it to our patients that we do it that way. And we don't just try to make an IoT product necessarily because it's cool and exciting, but we pick the right things to do without
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Anna, you have an unusual, I think, role among others here. You are part of a very, very large organization. CGI is huge, but
that's what I told you.
but your part of the organization is significantly smaller. So talk about the challenges of being in that context and what that brings to the table.
Yeah, well, we are big, and if you think like 76,000 people being one business, that would be terrible and nothing would work. Obviously, that's not the way CGI is organized. So we are actually a bundle of smaller businesses across the whole planet, actually. And that calls for, of course, a good framework that we all work to some point in same way. But of course, the technologies are very different, and countries are different, clients are different. You can't expect the real work to be done in the same way. That wouldn't work out either. And then there are some challenges. We, as a relatively small business within a huge company, we can never afford to be the cheapest one in the competition. So we have to do something else to win any deal. Yeah. Yes, because we have to make a living out of it, and for everyone of us and for the organization throughout the world.
Yeah. Switching gears slightly, healthcare, right? Neil, speak a little to where you see healthcare going, and how rapidly do you think we will get there? And sort of various aspects of not just technology adoption, but really changing the way healthcare is actually delivered and the experience that people have.
Right. Well, what we want is for healthcare to become almost organic. It's something you don't right now wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to manage my healthcare, right? You do that unless, maybe if you have a chronic disease or something like that, you might. But like diabetes or something like that, you might. And that becomes an important part of your life. But most of us don't. But it is so important that we do, right from when we are kids. But we accept the fact that we probably will not suddenly have this aha moment and we'll start doing this. So what do we have to do, and what does technology have to do, is become this passive kind of companion with this need to do this thing, manage your healthcare. And we've gotten to the point where we probably will. We are going from wearables now to embeddables, with companies like Proteus making these smart pills that you take, and you may not even know what's in that pill is a tracker to see whether you took it, and similarly, we'll start putting things into our body. We're doing it with pacemakers already, and other types of pumps and things like that. Being honest, slowly we'll develop these microchip kind of really nano maybe technologies that will go inside of us and help us manage our care continuously from the time when we are children all the way up, and also extend our lifespan that way, because that's ultimately, for many of us, a goal, right? To be able to live a good, healthy life for as long as we can. So I think that's where we will go. Now, how do we get there? There's lots happening right now, very large companies getting into this space, investing a lot in this space. Because for them, it's not just a global problem, but it's also a company issue. How do we keep good people healthy within our organizations, all of our employees healthy within our organizations, so that they can give us their maximum productivity is a big, big question, and a lot of that is being quantified now. So we see a lot happening in that space that will move us forward in quantum leaps in the next 5 to 10 years in healthcare.
I actually really like Neil's point about the type of tech that we might get to. I think nobody considers, an escalator technology anymore. And I think the generation after us probably not going to consider a mobile phone as tech, right? And the best tech is stuff that you forget is actually technology. And that's where you just start using it. I love the term organic. You start using these things organically, you start picking them up, and it happens at childhood. So Megan's presentation alluded to the fact that all of this stuff was happening with children aged 9 through 11, if not younger, maybe even kindergarten. And so to them, introducing technology as something that's just a given takes away the intimidation factor. It takes away the concept of this is something separate from myself, and I have to learn how to use it, and I have to somehow, engage with it, as opposed to saying, I just do it. Oh, so you engage with it and you learn it? Well, that's not the terms I would use to describe it. I just kind of do it. And so all of a sudden, introducing tech, because a lot of stuff is, I don't think IoT has really risen to the level of prominence that we thought it would. I don't think VR has yet either, but I think it's because it's not organic. It hasn't reached that point where people are just using it. There's still that us and them factor. And so it's quite possible that a few generations from now, it'll be completely organic.
Yeah, if you need a training course for your application, it's failed.
Right?
That's right.
That's exactly it. Exactly it.
Where I work, we spend a lot of time talking about how people work. It's very meta. We find that the more progressive companies that come to us, you can't talk about how people work without talking about technology. They don't want their technology to be seen. They don't want other, they want it to just be a part of the background, and I think you look at, I remember having this cable box that was just the biggest, most flashy thing. It had these flashy lights on it, and you'd be watching a movie in the dark, and it would just be flashing at you, right? It was so present all the time, and I recently upgraded to something that just hides the background. That does a much better job for me. I am completely in agreement. I think in the future we won't see it, and it'll just...
Remember the days of dial-up modems? Like, I think we all remember that noise. That was tech in your face.
Why did I need all the noise?
And it's not something alien, literally, that's a pun, because, in 1968, there was a Star Trek episode where, and this is a physician kind of episode, and we wrote it into a paper we recently published, where Spock is talking to the doc, and he's saying, the only thing we haven't replaced in this, and they're talking to the computer while they're in the elevator, okay? Right. And the only thing we haven't replaced in this new high-tech spaceship is the doctor, and he's poking at him, because unfortunately we have to have a doctor, but at some point, and then the doc says, at that point I'm going to quit space exploration, And that was 1968, and they were just talking to the computer in the elevator. Right?
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Like what used to be science fiction, sort of becomes reality not that much later. A question that's very practical, I think, for the audience here, right? The finding talent. Talent is scarce, right? I mean, finding really good people that can help solve problems, that can look at things holistically, understand the issue of delivering a solution to a problem, not just sort of building something for the sake of building something. So how do you, in the current, especially with the current economic situation, where the talent is truly scarce, even scarcer than it has been in the recent past, and in our industry it's extremely scarce. How do you find, retain, motivate? What do you do to manage your talent?
Yeah, that's, if you ever find out, let us know. That's, that's a tough one. I mean, that I think comes down to culture. I think, especially at the 407 ETR, we've invested really heavily in culture. And that's something that can't be bought. It's, when I say invest, I don't mean the dollar value, although there's always an associated dollar value for culture change. I'm talking about time, effort, attention to people, attention to needs. I think without a solid culture, you're just not going to, attract the talent that you want, but more than that, again, attracting talent that you want implies you can buy it. And I don't think that ever happens. What happens is that it's an internal growth, that people are attracted. It just comes down to the law of attraction. Right? People are attracted to something that they themselves want. Everybody wants it. But back to Niels' presentation, right? Nobody ever wants to lead that change. And I think that having an internal shift of focus to say that it's not just raw competency that we want, it's actually culture change that we want. It's people, we want to bring in people. They may not have a master's degree in comp sci, they may not have a PhD in quants, but we want people who understand culture, who are willing to change and foster culture growth. I think some of the most progressive companies in the world and some of the most successful companies in the world are the companies that look internally and say, we're going to invest in our culture. We're going to be inclusive. We're going to be dynamic. We're going to encourage we're going to encourage collaborative confrontation. We want to be able to argue a point to death and then head out for drinks. Like that's the type of culture that we want. And I think without that, you're never going to attract the talent that you want.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. That's a great point, Ravi. So when we started building our team, we knew that we'd have a lot of problems with retaining talent because we're in Philadelphia. There's Comcast right next to us. There's Vanguard right next to us. There's all these large corporations that could at any time, even when we find people, take them away from us, right? So we understood the importance of culture, and so we set these 12 principles for our team that defined our culture. The 0 principle, so there's really 13, is that we are human and our humanity is best realized in service of others because that's what we do. Right, as a healthcare organization, we improve and save lives. So that mission in itself, the why we do what we do, not the what we do or how we do it, but the why, was important to us, and to get that out to our folks. You asked about motivation, Yogesh. One of our 12 principles is that motivation is intrinsic, and what we mean by that is that you have to intrinsically be motivated to be the best at what you want to do, and we want people like that. Right, so we start with our purpose, and then we start talking about all these other things. Another one of our, and this establishes our culture. Another one of our principles is about measurement, and it says if you didn't measure it, it didn't happen. Right, so we measure before we do something so that we get a baseline, and then we measure while we're doing something, and then once we're done and we're moving on to something else to make sure that what we're doing is actually meaningful, and we can show the value at the end of it. That's right.
I can build on that a bit. I find that with our team, it's a mix of people, half of them millennial. Part of keeping them motivated, or maybe a lot of keeping them motivated, is getting them to understand the value that they contribute in the grander scale. So giving them context for what they might be working on, be it very, very small, be it solving a bit of code or working on a poster for something. Even if they're first couple of months on the job, they need to understand where it fits in the larger scale of things. And it helps that we work in a relatively flat organization, but they need to understand that their input is meaningful, and second, that there's a place for them to go. And it may not be that everyone gets to be the CEO, but that at least if they feel like we're growing them, that we're training them, that we're giving them opportunities to learn new things, I find that is a huge motivating factor. And certainly when you're dealing with a whole bunch of designers who want to be artists, and they're straight out of school, and that's how I find we get them to do their best work.
Yeah, it's important in CGI as well to build a spirit that encourages people to achieve their best. And I guess most of the people imagine that within this big company it's not easy, and partly it has to be formal. But yesterday I was telling you about the voice of a client concept. We interrogating our clients and giving them back. There's also obviously voice of a member. We're all members. That's part of the spirit, and we get to give our impact on how the companies run, and then they try to give it back to us, obviously. But it's very formal, structural, and it's anonymous, so it's not directly a spirit building aspect. But really, when something is changed, the way you were asking them to do, you get a wow. Someone read this in Canada, and now it's here in Finland. So
interesting. That is interesting.
Actually, it is a good format, really. Yeah.
So I was going to, Claudio, ask you an open edge question, but then I realized that probably would be wrong. So, somebody else from Technion should be answering that.
I'll wing it.
Anyway.
Bring it on.
But so I'll ask Anna. And Anna, I know that, of course, CGI has been a very, very long term, as you said yesterday, nearly 40 years with Progress. Has your team looked at OpenEdge 12? Are you thinking of looking at OpenEdge 12? Do you have any interest? I'm curious. I don't know what I thought I'd put you on the spot for the rest of the audience.
Yes, I'm so glad you asked this question because I was given the 20 minutes yesterday, so this had to be left out. So I think all the persons in this room, at least those who are part of the Open Edge community, received an email from a certain Mr. John Ainsworth. Are you present? A couple of weeks ago, telling us that OpenEdge 12 has showed some very promising results, speeding up the performance of the database, maybe tripling it. Mm-hmm. So I have news for you. The man is very careful in his promises, because we have run our own tests, and we were able to speed up it by 160 times.
Wow.
Yes. One of our architects was, he's very skillful. He managed to produce a poor code that took about 40 seconds to execute on OpenEdge 11.7. Then switching on to OpenEdge 12, it came back in 250 milliseconds.
Wow.
So if there's
John,
anyone
are
who
you
can,
listening? No, I don't know.
Yes.
You need to change that rocket ship.
Yes, he seems to be over-delivering clearly, and I take it you are his superior. But maybe we could discuss what's wrong with this timer or reaction time. Or some, but really, okay, one more ad. This is pretty much down to a feature called server-side join, which was suggested by a guy called Marko Myllymäki. Guess what company he works for? Okay, CGI. CGI. And after all this bragging, what is behind this, I think, is a dialogue.
Yeah.
It is, I would encourage everyone in this room. You don't have to have an old school lady on the main stage with Yogesh Gupta to have a discussion with Progress. They really do have architects, they do have people going to the office every day, and it's their work to listen to the clients. Like Claudio, you said in your presentation, you apologize to them. You only call them when you have problems. So please do that before you have problems.
Promise.
Thank you, Anna, for that plug.
Yes.
I really appreciate it. No, it's actually, it is tremendously exciting from Progress perspective when our users engage with us around things that we can do together better tomorrow. Right? I mean, in fact, that's how we can get better. And 160 times. Okay, I'll have to remember that.
Yeah. Well,
and are you not retraining that developer? No, I'm sorry.
and probably the boost is not every time that huge, but when it comes, and along with this improvement and moving to PaaS, I think we are going to deliver something to our clients, and it's for them. It's all about productivity these days. So there's an improvement to be seen.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
I guess last question. We're about to run out of time, and so I'll toss this out and sort of I'll let any of you take it. Maybe Claudia, you can start, but then others can follow up. All of us have lots of things that come our way. People suggest projects, people come up with ideas. What is, do you have a formal decision-making process? What is the process as to what to work on? How do you pick and choose? And how do you decide, what, that was the wrong thing to have picked, and I need to stop working on that? Because, sometimes there's this inertia. There's inertia before you get started, but there's this momentum that it has inertia that just keeps going, and we're working on that, we can't stop that.
I think everyone in this room is going to say that they're really, really busy people, and we all, as much as we try not to be a slave to our emails, we are. Certainly, like we pick our projects. We spend a lot of time trying to systemize and automate what we can. One place that comes to mind is our social media strategy is a spot where if we did every single thing that everyone wanted. We have so many stakeholders, we have so many people giving input, we have so many stories we have to tell in the limited amount of channels and the limited amount of time. So automation's been one way to do it. We employ, Facebook has a really great algorithm that's only, I think, a few months old, and they allow you to do A/B testing on all of your ads. So you could, you don't have to pick the ad anymore. You give them a slew of pictures, and they use artificial intelligence to just choose using how people are interacting with your posts and whether people are stopping long enough or whatever, which post then to serve up. We'll use something similar on Pinterest. We use an app called Tailwind for Pinterest, and it takes takes a whole bunch of factors into account. It takes when your followers are online, how active they are during what times of day, what kind of imagery they've enjoyed from you before, et cetera. And then you just feed it all your stuff. You don't pick what time, you don't pick anything, and it just shuffles it into a couple of months worth of content for you. And you can hit shuffle, which is really fun to see, and it does it again. So we're taking some of the drudgery where we can out of our work that way, and hopefully doing projects differently instead of choosing not to do them.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
Just to pick on that last thing you said there, Yogesh, I know we're running out of time, is that concept of how do you know when to stop? And I think it comes down to reiterating all about the value of culture. It's, this concept of it should be okay to fail. You should try to fail as fast as you possibly can, in fact. And that concept of saying that we all collectively decide, and there's companies out there that have that concept of disagree and commit, right? Everyone at the table can disagree about something, but once we've decided, we commit to it, we move forward, and then when we decide that this wasn't the right decision, you drop it. And that only comes from reiterating the value of culture. There needs to be that culture that allows you to do that, to fail fast, try new things, pivot. We started the discussion this afternoon about tech for the sake of tech. That has its own place, understanding that there's another segment of the organization that needs to worry about value. I think it all comes down to culture at the end of the day.
Well, there's a certain difference to that aspect if you're working for a client project or a product development project.
For sure.
Different
That's right.
metrics to decide.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you, sorry.
Oh, no, you don't.
In our case, we use design a lot, to determine, Yogesh, what we're going to do, because a lot of our problems are visible. So we do a lot of ethnographic research to find out whether the person who's coming to us many times with a solution, not the problem, they found out what the real problem is, what the outcome that they want, if they solve the problem, what's that outcome, and then build a solution that meets that problem and then delivers that outcome, and then measure throughout, as I mentioned earlier, so that we know if we're doing something wrong.
Great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've already run over time. Help me thank the panelists here. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and we'll see you in the evening. Oh,
Yep.
Lauren's going to do that.
One thing before we go, guys.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, our panelists. Great job, guys.